Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. As always, likes, comments, and subs are greatly appreciated. I wanted to continue on with my series of looking at the ZOOM R20 multi-track recorder. For those of you who have been long-time subscribers, I will be getting back to my different covers with papercraft visuals. Don't worry, those are coming up soon. For those of you who are brand new to the channel, please feel free to check out my content where I kind of cover video games and other pop culture relevant material using a variety of low-tech papercraft visuals. But for now, wanted to continue on investigating the features that are available in the ZOOM R20 multi-track recorder. If you haven't seen the other videos so far, I have an unboxing video where I go over some of the basic features and use recording elements of the ZOOM R20, give my initial impressions, and then I've also put up a video looking at the rhythm track in particular. So for this one, if you haven't looked at the ZOOM R20, the key distinguishing feature here is the touchscreen interface that kind of separates it from the rest of the competition when it comes to multi-track recorders. That touchscreen interface does give it some DAW-like functionality. For today's video, I wanted to cover the synth track and the main features that I've discovered using the synth track for about a week and a half now with the ZOOM R20. I've got some projects that are lined up here. I created one that's called Synth Test. I'm going to open that up. That's on the home screen right now. And you can see that we've got our track set up. I really just created a rhythm loop down here on tracks 3 and 4. That is using the various built-in loops that are contained in the R20, and you can see that in the ZOOM R20 drum rhythm track video that I posted. So I just put that in place so we can have something behind us as we look into what's available through the synth track. I'm going to zoom in here so you can see the screen clearly, or at least a little more clear. You can put these tracks wherever you want, but you only get one synth track and you only get one rhythm track. If you want to move the rhythm track around, I have it stereo linked on tracks 3 and 4 at the moment. You can just click the rhythm track and drag it from the side here down to whichever track you want. So I could drop it to tracks 5 and 6, or drag it and bring it back up to tracks 3 and 4 so we could see it. That's how you move around a rhythm track. If you have a single track, you could just click and highlight a single track and then drag it to any other track that you want. So if you recorded something on track 1, you could just click that single track and then move it down to track 5 if you wanted to. For the synth track, let's drop a synth track on track 1. We select track 1. It says it's an audio file right now. Well, we can change that to a synth track by hitting the piano icon. Again, you only get one synth track per project for the R20. Once you have your synth track highlighted, you can hit this little drawer icon that's next to the timing signatures. Once you touch that, you can see the different synth sounds that are built into the R20 that you have available to you, and you could scroll through them. There are 18 different synth sounds, at least right now with version 1.0 of the firmware. Kit, or number 19, is a drum kit, so if you can use the piano to kind of play a variety of stock drum sounds that they have loaded. So if we just load up one of the synth sounds, we can hit the piano icon that's next to it or on that line, and you get a touchscreen piano. And you can play whatever you want. This is actually multi-touch. The problem with this is great for if you just wanted to check something out. You can play something in the background. But you can't record with the touchscreen. So that's the limitation that you have with the touchscreen. It's great for just kind of checking out the sounds and how it might fit in with the rest of your project and the song that you're building up. Unfortunately, if you try to record, now I can hit track 1 and arm it so it turns red. We're ready to record, and if I hit the record button, you get an error message that says you do not have a MIDI keyboard. You need some way to control the synth sounds on the R20. You're going to need to use an external device. I've used a variety of external devices. I've pretty much gotten everything that I've tested with this thing, amazingly, to work, but you do have to connect everything through the USB-C port that is on the side of the ZOOM R20. So it doesn't have like a 5-pin mini connector. you have to use the USB-C port. The only thing that I haven't been able to successfully connect and control the R20 with is an iRig Keys IO49 unit that is kind of plug and play for GarageBand and iPads, which works nice for that. But with this, I couldn't get it to play nice for whatever reason. I thought I would test a couple different controllers out, or show a couple different controllers and how they interface with the ZOOM R20 here. And I thought I would actually try some kind of crazy stuff just so you could see that amazingly things seem to work pretty easily. So what I have up first is, it's almost like a toy. This is an Alesis 32 key piano I just found in a closet. And so what it does have in the back here is it has a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack out, and it also has a USB type B port. I didn't even think this had MIDI out, but I thought I would test it. And what I have here is a cable that is USB type B on that side, USB type A on this side. If I plug this into the Alesis keyboard, I still can't connect this as is because this is USB A. So where I wanted to kind of show that this amazingly works is I've got this connector that's USB A to USB C. Frankly, I thought this had no chance of working. All right, I've plugged that in and I've connected now the Alesis keyboard, the 32 keyboard, through USB-B to USB-A, USB-A to USB-C, and now it's connected in there. In order to get this to work, we have to go back in our settings, go back to the project like home screen, go to the global settings, and it asks if you have a USB MIDI keyboard. You just hit on. Once you select that back in the global settings, you can go back to your project, and we have our synth channel that's ready to go. And I can actually control it now with the Alesis keyboard. Even though this thing kind of looks like a toy, amazingly, it sort of worked, and it wasn't that painful. So it does work. We can record something. So if I set this up, and really we just hit record. And we're done. So we laid down now a track using this kind of cheap keyboard. I'll go ahead and unplug this simply so I can move the R20 back over and zoom in, and we can see what we've created. If I put this over here for a second, go back to the R20 and I could zoom in now. Let's go back to the screen. All right. What you can notice right off the bat is the difference in the types of channels. On the stereo linked channels 3 and 4, our tracks 3 and 4, those are audio files. Now for the rhythm tracks, again with the ZOOM R20, you're going to use drum loops to build up a rhythm for yourself that you can use for your song. Those are audio files. What you notice in track 1, that doesn't look like an audio file. It is a MIDI track. And you see the different type of MIDI notes there. Now, if you're a guitar player and you've just been laying down audio tracks your whole life, you want to know what the advantage of using a MIDI track is. Well, why wouldn't you just use a keyboard? And with the keyboard, run a stereo out into channels 1 and 2 on the R20 and lay down an audio track. You could absolutely 100% do that. If the keyboard player makes a mistake with one note, you'd have to try to cut it out and then punch in, punch out, and record like a missed chord, something like that, in order to fix the track. Well, with MIDI, you have some extra options that are available to you, and I'm kind of surprised that the R20 offers up some extra editing features. If we click and highlight the track, now I can just drag this and I can loop it over and over again and create multiples of this if I wanted to. But we can do more than that. There is a tiny icon up at the top that looks like a pair of scissors. If I click that, we actually get to this MIDI track view. And now what you can see are the notes that are being played. If I hit the play button, the timeline marker will scroll across. And you can actually see all the notes. Well, you could do more than that. You can edit the notes as well. If you want, you can, I'll move the timeline marker back, but you have a couple different options up here. You can hit the pencil icon. And once you do that, now you can edit the notes that are in place. So I can delete one of the notes if I want to, and just remove it by clicking it. I can also add a note if I want and put the note up there. So if I play that, you can see I deleted the note here, added in an extra note, and you can manipulate this as you go along. So if you make a couple mistakes, kind of easy to correct. You can also, since I've got this one highlighted, you can use some of the other features like the length tool, and once you have that, you can drag that out and you can create a longer note. If I rewind this a little bit, so you can change the length of your notes. You can also, while that's selected, the last option that you have available is velocity. If I click that and click that note, you could see the velocity icon or the velocity menu up at the top. And you can use the plus and minus here to change the velocity. Essentially, if you were hitting that pad, I can also hit the slider a little bit. And it slightly tweaks the way that it sounds, kind of like the attack on the button. Back it up, hit play, and it was essentially a little bit quieter. The dynamic range on that isn't that exciting. You have to kind of like drop it all the way down to 20 before you really start to see a decrease, but it does give you some control over the different sounds that you have on the synth engine. I wish, it's not really even a synth engine, it's more like just a synth voice. I wish you did have a few extra options here where you can modulate the sound, a few knobs to turn. You can change the waveform slightly that it's building up. But you can see the power that you have here when it comes to creating a synth track, a MIDI track. And you can also test out the sounds with the keyboard on the side. You can't lay down notes that way, but it does allow you to kind of test, oh, do I want that note or do I want that note? And then you could just hit the pencil icon again and drop in a note for yourself if you'd like. And just put that in place and test it out. So you get a lot of different options when you use the Synth MIDI track here. You can actually edit the stuff on the screen with the touchscreen interface. Now the touchscreen is, depending on the size of your fingers, it's kind of hard to hit some of those small notes occasionally, but it does indeed work. And frankly, it's a little bit better and offers more than I initially thought it would. So we do have that in place. Now, like I said, you only have one synth track. That's it. You can't, now that we have this, oh, could I lay down another synth track with a different sound on track 2? I'm sorry, you can't. But there is a workaround. If you're happy with this and you like the way that track sounds, you can turn that and render it into what'll become a stereo wave file, and then you can reuse that stereo wave file. If I go back to the beginning, I'd like to render this into a wave file, but I don't want to have the drums in there. I just want the piano sound. So you can open up your track view and then mute your drums and bring that back over. So the only thing that we have that makes sound right now is going to be our MIDI file. All right, let's bring that back. If you want, then you can hit the settings and go down to the bottom, it says rendering. If we hit rendering to SD card, instead of synth test, let's just call this synth, I don't know, we'll call it synth 9. Hit enter. It does take a few seconds because it's going to render this MIDI file into essentially a .wav file that you can use as an audio track. You could drop in that audio track wherever you'd like. So after it creates this audio track for us, we can now, we're done. Okay, it tells us it's on the SD card. Close that up. And now, great. So for track 2, if you hit select track 2, and then if you just touch it on the side, it says add audio file at the top. Well, let's add an audio file from the SD card. And we have synth 9 wave. Hit the plus button, and it'll tell us different number of channels. That's because we had a single mono track. Well, when you render it, it turns it into a stereo track. So if we go back here, we're going to need to do something else. I can take the rhythm track, and let's select the rhythm track and move it down on the screen. Now for tracks 3 and 4, we can open up our track view, touch track 3, it says track settings, click that, and I believe down here, stereo link, let's turn that on. And you can see now it changed it to track 3 and 4. We have a stereo linked track. Track 3 and 4 is available. Let's touch track 3 and 4. Add audio file, SD card, synth wave 9. Enter. And try to drop that in. Done. All right. Now we can delete our wave file up here. Click that, delete that, execute. Let's open this up, make sure we're not muted. Everything is playing. All right, go back to the beginning, hit play. And now you can see our MIDI file that we created with the synth track is an audio file that we could drop in. So it's kind of a workaround for us if we'd like to now use a second synth track. Our first synth track, that's kind of locked in stone now. We can't go back and edit it with a MIDI file, but we can go to this synth track and just pick a different synth sound if we wanted to. Hit play. And you can see, you can drop in a secondary synth track that way. So it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to create some stuff here, but you have to create it one track at a time. You won't be able to create a little bit and then go in here and try to create a secondary synth track. You kind of, if you've got a 3-minute song, you're gonna have to create a 3-minute MIDI file for whatever synth sound voice that you want to use, render it into an audio file, drop it in, and then you can create a secondary synth track that way. All right, I'm going to take a pause really quick. I want to go ahead and grab another instrument that I want to show you that you can use as a MIDI controller. Okay, so I wanted to show you another thing that you can use as a MIDI controller, which frankly I was surprised by. This is a Teenage Engineering OPZ all-in-one sampler, sequencer, synth, controls lighting rigs, and it has a headphone out, but it also has a USB out, and that is a USB-C, and it has MIDI control. So we could potentially use this as a controller. I didn't think this was going to work, but I had to kind of take a peek in the manual. If you turn on the OPZ, you have to access the MIDI menu, which is accessed by these two buttons up at the top here. It's I believe it's called the window button, but it's also the tempo control. If you hold down both of those, all of these light up a yellowish orange color, and then you have to select which MIDI setting you want. I'm pretty sure that the MIDI out is number 3, so we hit the 3 button right there, and it highlights it. So now we're going to send a MIDI out signal. You have to turn the device off, and then we'll plug in this case, it's going to be a USB-C to a USB-C cable into our OPZ. I'll move this up so you can kind of see how this is going to work, I hope. All right, we've got this in there. And you can see it actually will control the synth voice on the Zoom R20. So we can use this as, again, a controller for the synth engines on the R20. I wanted to show this because, one, I just thought it was sort of dorky cool, but two, I have been impressed that the Zoom R20, even though it's a USB input for MIDI control, which sometimes could be a little bit spotty, seems to be working with almost anything that I've plugged into it. Again, the only thing that I haven't been able to get to work is an iRig Keys 49 unit. So the Synth track does have a lot of positive features for it. It's better than I thought it would be, and it has, you know, some of those editing features that I wasn't really expecting to be there until I sort of dug into the menus a little bit and was playing around with the device. With all that said, I don't think that anybody should purchase the R20 thinking that they're going to have this fully fleshed out synth engine or series of synth engines inside of this device. If you want to use the R20 right now, especially on version 1.0, you're buying this because it's a multi-track recorder and it has a touchscreen that gives you some of these DAW-like features that you can use for copying and pasting and minor editing. I think like a guitar player who maybe sometimes plays in a band but does a lot of solo work and just some songwriting work where they're laying down a lot of audio tracks. They want to sometimes loop things through because they're not using a looping pedal. They're mostly recording stuff and they're not playing live with looping pedals. This could be a great device for you where you're laying down a bunch of stuff. You could drop down a bunch of tracks, and then sometimes you're recording with a band. You can use, you know, tracks 9 through 16 to record acoustic drums potentially. So you've got all your drums set up there, and then you flip things over and you're going to use tracks 1 through 8 for guitar 1, guitar 2, bass, lead vocals, backup vocals, and then some other different types of sounds. You could really create a fully featured song that way. If you want to buy a multi-track recorder that has a lot of rich drum features built into it, this isn't necessarily the way to go. If you want a multi-track recorder that also has a lot of synth engines inside of it, this also, right now, not the way to go. It's more you're buying this for the multi-track recording with some DAW-like features. And then I would view it as a bonus, you can lay down drum loops to get a basic rhythm track going, again, largely for like a guitar player that could just have something behind them that they could lay down their tracks and get a song going. And then, you know, with the synth engine, it's not bad that you have some MIDI level control and you can make those edits on the fly as you go through and delete some notes that are wrong, add in something new, and tweak the sound slightly with essentially some sequencing functions. So overall, I like what the Zoom R20 has to offer from a multi-track recorder standpoint and some of those DAW-like light editing features, but it's definitely not a unit for everyone. Here, I just wanted to highlight the different synth engines or the different synth sounds that you have and the different synth capabilities that you have for this unit. So I'm going to end that here. I'll, you know, if you have any kind of questions, if you have any kind of comments, I'll do my best to answer them at the bottom of the video. Thanks again for coming back to the channel, and hope to see you again soon. Bye.